Welcome to Channel 7 News at 7. I'm the anchor, Mike, and this is my co-host.
Mike. Today we'll be discussing a very prevalent matter in society, children.
By definition, infancy is the first year of life, whereas childhood to adolescence is ages 6 to 17 years old. There are some physiological differences between children and adults. Would you like to discuss one of them, Mike?
Yes, I'd love to. I'll be discussing the physiological difference between children and adults when it comes to their bones. During childhood, bone mineral density increases drastically and doesn't peak until they're in their 20s. After the 20s, bone mineral density only decreases for the rest of their life. So, if you can increase bone mineral density throughout childhood in order to have a higher peak, this means that you can have a lesser decline once you start declining in your 20s. Oh, what's that, Mike? You have a question?
Yes, Mike, I do. How do you increase bone mineral density?
Well, Mike, there are two good ways to increase your bone mineral density. One way is to perform weight-bearing exercises, and another way is to have good nutrition, such as consuming more vitamin D and calcium.
Thanks, Mike. The next physiological difference that we'll talk about today between children and adults is muscle. Muscle mass usually increases throughout your life due to exercise from hypertrophy, growth, and weight gain. For females, muscle mass usually peaks around 16 to 20 years of age, whereas for males, muscle mass usually peaks from 18 to 25. And now for adipose tissue.
We all have fat cells from birth, clearly, but they grow in size as we age. The amount of fat that an individual has depends on their diet, their exercise level, and their genes. Females have a higher increase in fat during and after puberty due to the release of estrogen. But fat mass and fat-free mass increase at the same time. So, an increase in absolute fat mass may not necessarily mean an increase in relative fat mass.
Next, we'll discuss the nervous system. Myelination of nerves is needed for fast reactions and skilled movements. Conduction of nerves is slower in non-myelinated cells. The myelination of nerves occurs most rapidly during childhood, but continues after puberty. Practice can improve performance. However, full myelination and maturation of the nervous system is needed for full development of the child. And the development of strength is dependent on the maturation of the nervous system. Now that we've given you a brief introduction on this topic, we're going to refer you to two specialists, Mike and Mike, who will tell you more about the physiological responses that children have to acute exercise.
Hi, I'm Mike, the specialist. I'm here to talk to you about strength, because I'm strong. In children, increases in strength are impossible until they're developed neurologically. Males tend to show a greater rate of strength gain between 12 and 16 years old, whereas females have a more gradual and linear increase in strength gains throughout puberty.
I'm Mike. I'm the other specialist. I'm going to talk to you today about cardiovascular and respiratory differences in children than in adults. Blood pressure is directly related to size, so children have a lower blood pressure. Blood flow to muscle in children is greater for any given volume due to a decrease in total peripheral resistance. Children have a smaller heart and a decreased blood volume, so this decreases stroke volume. To compensate and maintain a similar cardiac output, heart rate has to increase. However, an increased submaximal heart rate can't completely compensate for the decrease in stroke volume, so cardiac output is slightly less in children than it is in adults. To maintain adequate oxygen uptake in children, the child's AVO2 difference has to increase, and this is due to an increase in blood flow. Most oxygen is directed towards the children's muscles instead of other parts of the body. Maximum heart rate in children is higher than adults. However, it decreases linearly with age. During maximal exercise, the lower blood volume and the smaller heart in children can limit a child's performance. However, this shouldn't be a serious limitation because the child carries a much lower body mass than most adults do.
When it comes to aerobic exercise, children tend to have a lower absolute VO2 max, but in relation to adults, they have a similar relative VO2 max. Children have a significantly decreased ability to perform anaerobic activities due to a couple of different factors. They have a lower glycolytic capacity, about 50 to 60% of what adults would normally have. They have lower lactate levels due to their smaller amount of muscle mass and their greater reliance on the aerobic metabolism. But the ATP and phosphocreatine system levels are similar to those of adults, so for those first 10 to 15 seconds, they will be okay, but after 15 to 20 seconds, their output will be compromised. Due to these various reasons, the anaerobic power and mean power for children will be lower.
Now for the endocrine system. Exercise is a potential stimulus for growth hormone and insulin-like growth factor. Children have a higher stress response to exercise and relative hypoglycemia. The cause is not known for the hypoglycemia, but it's just something to be aware of.
Lastly, children have an immature capacity for hepatic glycogenolysis. Therefore, they rely more heavily on fat oxidation than adults.
And now, a word from our sponsor, Mike, from ACSM.
I'd like to discuss the common misconception that strength training isn't safe for kids. Contrary to popular belief, strength training is safe for kids. There's a common myth out there that says that strength training can stunt growth through bone plate disturbances, but this myth has since been debunked. Not only is it safe, but it's beneficial for kids. Strength training can lead to improved muscular strength and fitness. It can lead to improved motor fitness skills such as jumping and sprinting, and it could reduce the incidence of some sports injuries by increasing the strength of tendons, ligaments, and bones. Although it's been shown that strength training is safe for kids, it also must be emphasized what strength training is. ACSM states that strength training is a specialized form of physical conditioning distinct from the competitive sports of weightlifting and powerlifting, in which individuals attempt to lift maximal amounts of weight in competition. Strength training refers to a systematic program of exercises designed to increase an individual's ability to exert or resist force. In general, if kids are ready to participate in organized sports or activities such as Little League baseball, soccer, or gymnastics, then they're ready for some type of strength training. As long as they have the emotional maturity to accept and follow directions, they should be plenty safe when doing this. The goal of their strength training program should be to improve their musculoskeletal strength while exposing them to a variety of safe, effective, and fun training methods. Adult strength training guidelines and training philosophies should not be imposed on youngsters who are anatomically, physiologically, and psychologically less mature. It's essential that all youth strength training programs are closely supervised by knowledgeable instructors who understand the uniqueness of children and have a sound comprehension of strength training principles and safety guidelines. This exercise environment should be safe and free of hazards, and all participants should receive instruction regarding proper exercise technique and training procedures. A medical examination is desirable, although not mandatory for apparently healthy children who want to participate in a strength training program. However, a medical examination is recommended for children with known or suspected health problems.
And now some chronic adaptations from Mike in the field.
Chronic responses in body composition are generally the same between children and adults. Resistance training can be very effective in increasing strength in children, but prepubescent gains are largely neural, not in muscle mass. This can cause improved motor skill, coordination, and improved motor unit activation. Resistance training between children and adults should be prescribed in the same manner, but with children, proper lifting technique and strategies needs to be emphasized. In regards to chronic adaptations of aerobic exercise with children, although VO2 max doesn't improve with exercise, their running performance does due to their improved running economy. Children's VO2 maxes do improve with age as the heart gets bigger and their stroke volume moves up.
Let's go to Mike in the field.
Thank you, Mike Squared. I'm here today in the field and we're going to be talking about ADHD and exercise's effects on this certain disease. It's a very common diagnosis among many children and it can last until adulthood. So the effects of exercise have been shown and studied on children and adults with ADHD. It's a safe and effective alternative treatment for ADHD. Both cardio and non-cardio being defined
With an acute bout of cardiovascular exercise, students with ADHD saw improved cognitive flexibility, processing speeds, and vigilance, improved academic performance on reading comprehension and math tests, and improved motor and persistence, which is the ability to sustain motor patterns like keeping your eyes focused on one thing. In addition, parents and teachers reported improvements in behavior such as diminished interruptions and unintentional aggression.
Chronic effects of cardio.
When students performed aerobic exercise over a long period of time, they reported improvements in attention spans, general ADHD symptoms, self-esteem, academics, and classroom behavior. Also, they stated that their anxiety levels and depression levels went down.
Acute effects of non-cardio.
In kids who performed Tai Chi, parents and teachers reported improved anxiety and conduct and decreased hyperactivity.
The biggest takeaway we can get from exercise and ADHD is that exercise stimulates the release of catecholamines, proteins, and enzymes that are lacking in people with ADHD. So this has been proven to be an effective additional treatment in kids with ADHD.
Hi, we're back in the field to talk about sports specialization. Early sports specialization has three main components. Those three components are practicing one sport more than 8 months in a year, choosing one main sport to focus on, and quitting all of your other sports to focus on that one sport. Now, this increase in sports specialization has been correlated positively and significantly with increases in overuse injuries in children. Adults involved in youth sports should take note and be aware of signs and symptoms of physical stress, overuse injuries, and burnout. When you see these signs and symptoms, adults should take care and back off training frequency or intensity.
And now, another word from our sponsors at ACSM.
Children should exercise aerobically every day at a moderate to vigorous intensity, making sure that they include vigorous intensity at least 3 days a week. Every time they exercise, it should be for 60 or more minutes a day. You should make exercises enjoyable and developmentally appropriate for their physical needs. These activities could include, but are not limited to, running, brisk walking, swimming, dancing, and bicycling. Children should also incorporate bone-strengthening exercises 3 or more days a week into their exercise regime. The intensity should be the same or similar to aerobic exercise, and the exercises should be included in their 60 minutes a day of aerobic exercise. Types of bone-strengthening exercises that you can complete with children are running, jumping rope, basketball, tennis, resistance training, and hopscotch. Strength training should also be completed 3 or more days a week at an intensity of 8 to 15 submaximal repetition to the point of moderate fatigue. This will also be included in their 60 minutes a day or more of exercise. Strength training can either be structured, such as lifting weights or working with resistance bands, or unstructured, like playing on playground equipment, climbing trees, or playing tug of war.
And now back to Mike in the field to talk about attitudes towards exercise.
Gratitude shout out to the two mics. All right, we're back in the field and we're here to talk to you about attitude toward exercise. Now, adults' aversion to exercise has been suggested to be linked to unfavorable experiences in their childhood with physical activity. Now, Ferguson ran a study that asked students about their current exercise behavior, their intent to exercise after their physical education programs had ended, their self-esteem, the amount of time they spent outside of physical education doing sport activity, the perceived benefits of exercise, their own knowledge of exercise, and their own attitudes toward physical education. Now, the interesting thing about this study was that all of these factors were significantly and positively correlated with intent to exercise and exercise behavior, with the exception of knowledge of exercise. Now, self-esteem. there was a very large positive and significant correlation with intent to exercise and the child's current exercise behavior. This can be fostered in a physical education program through non-competitive physical activity. The school in this case didn't keep score, the students refereed the games, there was random grading, and the grading was based on the knowledge of the game and the child's cooperation with their teammates. This in total encouraged the students to take part in the physical activity on a daily basis, and it took away the stress of grading because it was random, so the kids didn't know who was being graded on what day. This is a potentially modifiable variable, and it's associated with intent to exercise. So targeting physical education programs to enhance the attitudes of children toward exercise is so key.
Major key.
Now, we're talking about intent to exercise. What about actual real exercise as adults? There have been studies that have shown a correlation between these attitudes as kids and adult exercise time. So these students were asked how much they cared about sports and the amount of time spent playing these sports.
This graph shows the surveyed students' attitudes towards sport. 50% cared very much, 33% cared somewhat, 14% cared a little, and 3% didn't care at all. This graph shows the surveyed students' participation in outside sports. 42% participated very much outside, 29% participated somewhat, 15% participated a little, and 12% didn't participate at all.
These people followed up 5 and 10 years post to determine how much moderate to vigorous physical activity these people did based on when they were a child and when they were adults. Overall, moderate to physical activity was decreased, but both 5 and 10 years later, kids with more favorable attitudes toward exercise reported 30 to 40% more time spent doing moderate to vigorous physical activity. This difference could be clinically significant. It could cause a decrease in risk of cardiovascular disease, which could save lives. All right. The biggest takeaway we can get from these two studies is that the exercise interventions that we as exercise physiologists do in physical education programs is that they should not just be solely about increasing positive attitudes, but they should include increasing positive attitudes in kids because that has been correlated with increasing adult physical activity time. Back to you, Mike.
And now for some special considerations by another specialist named Mike.
With proper training and supervision, children can safely participate in strength training activities. Generally, the guidelines that work for adults also work for children. 8 to 15 submaximal repetitions should be completed with good form before the load is increased. It's also prudent to be conservative to reduce the risk of injury, overtraining, and loss of interest. Due to immature thermoregulatory systems, children have a lower capacity to dissipate heat through evaporation. They rely more heavily on convection and radiation. They have a greater ratio of body surface to mass than adults. This is good when the temperature is lower than their body temperature because they readily dissipate heat. However, when environmental temperatures are higher than their body temperature, they take in heat much more quickly. Because of this, adults working in youth sports should avoid hot and humid environments and make sure that the children they are supervising are properly hydrated. In addition, they have greater conductive heat loss in the cold as well. This could lead to a greater risk for hypothermia. Adults should also take note of this. Obese, overweight, or physically inactive children may not be able to achieve the 60 minutes per day of moderate to vigorous activity goal. These children should start at a more moderate level and gradually increase the frequency and the level of their activity. Kids with certain diseases such as asthma, diabetes, cystic fibrosis, and cerebral palsy should have their exercise prescriptions tailored to their condition, symptoms, and physical fitness level. Many children do not meet recommendations. They should attempt to participate in a variety of age-appropriate physical activities. In addition, a major goal should be for kids to decrease the time spent doing their sedentary activities and increase the time they spend doing physical activities. Keeping kids interested in physical activity is a very important part of working with this population. Remember to have a lot of variety and also some fun.